we've got members of the Mi'kmaq Warrior Society here. Most of you, I think, will know what happened very recently in the fall near the Elsipogtog First Nations. Both Cody in the middle here and Suzanne, and I don't know if all of you, because all of you were involved directly in that blockade, in the police raid, in the arrests. So I'm going to leave it up to them to start us off with some what they'd like to share, and then we'll see where this goes in terms of strategizing around how we look at this massive problem: resource capitalism, indigenous land rights and title, the big tangled mess that is, and what we can do about it.
Well, my name is Suzanne Patles. My community is known as SFU, but I like to refer myself as belonging to my indigenous territory, which is Mi'kmaq. And I'd like to recognize, that, I was reminded this morning I'm a visitor to this territory, just as everybody else who steps into this territory. And that's one thing that we need to change inside of our own mentalities, that we're all visitors in unceded and unsurrendered territory, and it does not belong to us. It belongs to the indigenous people's children and grandchildren that aren't even here yet. So this is why it's important to stand up for the rights of the future generations. It's not for us who are standing here today. We could say, oh yes, I want my rights fulfilled, but what good is it to have your rights fulfilled when you're not taking care of the future generations that are to come? In regards to resource extraction, I think it's been clearly seen throughout colonial history how they've taken our trees, how they've taken our animals, they've taken the furs. Not only have they done that, in order for them to successfully do that, they take our children, they take our men, they take our women. They throw us into residential schools. They make us live in destitution and poverty. Take a look at the reservations, and 85% of the population is living in poverty, and we have to rely on the lands and natural resources, not these resources that come out of the ground that are supposed to stay in the ground. We rely on the medicines, we rely on the animals to survive. And without that, we cannot survive as a people. So if that's taken away from us, if they go and destroy our lands and our waters, what are we left with when we're still living in poverty? When Supreme Court case ruling that came out of my territory, which was the Marshall decision, stated that we had the right to a moderate livelihood. How moderate is our livelihood when we're all still living in poverty? I don't see that as being fulfilled myself. So no agreements or no decisions should be made until that is fulfilled. And if our people are still living in poverty, then obviously it has not been fulfilled. In regards to resource extraction in our territory, SWN Resources, which is a subsidiary company to SWN Resources in Texas, is a New Brunswick company that is doing the testing. And this is all it was. And some people were thinking, maybe it was, maybe they were already taking the stuff out of the ground or pumping the chemicals in the ground. But what needed to be understood was you have to defend your land even from the testing, because even the testing disturbs the land, even the testing destroys the water. And after they're done this testing, they're going to come for the resources that they find. And if you don't stop them at this initial stage, then it's going to be easier for them to be able to move past that. And from fighting against companies for a while, you begin to understand where you have to intervene when it comes to resource extraction. And you cannot let them, and I know a lot of people are like, well, we want to be consulted with, we want an environmental assessment. No, you don't. You don't want to be consulted with, and you don't want an environmental assessment, because part of the environmental assessment is consultation. And as soon as they get as far as that, then half of your struggle is already over. So this is why it was important for the resistance in so-called New Brunswick to fight this company before they get to that stage. And successfully, the company only finished maybe 50% of their testing. And they were supposed to be done within 3 months, and they were actually there for over 6 months, and they weren't even able to finish their 100% that they wanted to get accomplished, which is good. So when we talk about these companies coming into our territories, it's more than just consent. When you're taking Aboriginal studies and Aboriginal law, you get told about the whole process. You get told about the court case decisions that come through, and you get told about how all of them flow together and how, you know, consultation is a fiduciary obligation of the Crown. Well, if it was such a fiduciary obligation of the Crown, then Premier Albert in New Brunswick should have consulted with the First Nations people prior to issuing the license or lease, which did not happen. Unfortunately, we need to move beyond consultation. We need to stop thinking within the colonialist box that they place us into. We need to demand consent. They need consent from the grassroots people, not the people who are doing the negotiations, not the people who are sitting in elected Indian Act representatives. It's the people who are the treaty beneficiaries, which are the grassroots people. And they're the ones who are going to stay true to what they want, because they're the ones who are living in the poverty, and they're not the ones who are going to be bought off. And it's important to realize, you know, if these people are still living in poverty and they're not willing to be bought off by a check so that they may achieve a so-called moderate livelihood for a short limited time, then really what good is this company going to do within our traditional territories? So our problem with hydraulic fracturing is because most of our territory is pristine. There's a lot of places to be able to hunt and gather, and we don't want that destroyed because we already have no natural growth. We came out here and we've seen all these big beautiful trees, and we don't see that in our territory. All our trees are small because they have already all been destroyed. Our lands were completely demolished. Our animals were gone. We're slowly getting some of our animals back, but there's some things that were true to us that we'll never get back. And there's one thing that you're told is, according to the government, they're not supposed to attack the core of Indianness. Well, the core of our Indianness is our water, because that connects us spiritually to everything, and it connects us to everything else. So this is what they're attacking. If they're not supposed to attack it, then why are they? So what we all need to understand is how far are we willing to go in order to do this? And in academia, you could really do a lot of things, because you could use your research as resistance. I was a student at my own university back in my territory. I didn't finish my degree because I decided to implement what I learned on the ground, and I decided to that it's not enough for me to just sit there and write papers. It's not enough for me to just sit there and do research. It wasn't good enough for myself. You know, I wasn't saying it wasn't good enough for my community. It wasn't good enough for myself. I had to be better than I was yesterday. So it's a constant struggle to try to be better than you were the day before, to try to make a better life for my children. I have a 10-year-old and a 4-year-old at home, and I don't want them to have to go through this struggle themselves. So it's important for me to lay down the proper foundations for them, so that when they have to go through this, that their path will be easy, that it won't be as difficult as it was for us to have to go through all of this injustice. Because when you take a look at what happened in New Brunswick, and we talked about all of these Supreme Court case decisions, all of this, these rights, your Section 35, you're constitutionally protected, it means nothing. It's just a premise. UNDRIP, it was signed, it means nothing, it has no legal binding. You know, these are just little napkins that they throw at you, you know, wipe away your tears. It's just like Harper's apology, you know, it was just another napkin to wipe away your tears, you know, stop your crying, and here you go, take a piece of the pie. And it's unfortunate that the New Brunswick government is severely corrupt, because when you take a look at all of these cases that have gone through in regards to Indian status, and I'm sure you guys learned a lot about how the Lovelace and these other women who stood up for their rights were able to get status for their children and for themselves, and how they were able to change the whole system in regards to status. But when I was charged and I was disputing my conditions, because I said they violated my treaty rights and my rights that I have to go anywhere in my territory. And when I threw my status card down, which is part of the justification test, if you have a status card, well, there's 3 parts of the justification test, and you're supposed to be able to, pass all of these, and the veto out is a status card. When I presented my status card in court, the Crown prosecutor told me I was instructed to not consent to your Aboriginal descent. So it had me puzzled, and I'm standing there and I'm like, why aren't you honoring Supreme Court case decisions? And I was throwing all of this around, and the judge was siding with him. And I was like, this is unfair, this is unjust. So I still continued to fight, and he told me, well, you get your elders out here, and you get this and you get that to prove that you're Aboriginal. The judge was telling me this. And I was like, I really don't need the proof, you know, because this already has been laid out in the law. So if they're not willing to adhere to things that were already laid out in the law, you could already see the injustice that, you know, are already being laid out. Cody here has a condition on him that he's not allowed to be at any shale gas protest. Okay, what happened to your constitutional right to freedom of assembly? So New Brunswick is a picture of what we're going to see all across Canada. You know, it's where urban owns the whole province. They own everything, and they own the media, they own the small businesses, they own the larger businesses, they own so much of the province. They're practically in bed with the ministers and with the government. It's like a hand-in-hand relationship that they have going on so that they can continue to feed their pockets with more money. And this corporate greed has driven this province into a complete oppression, because I was used to seeing oppressed people within a reservation, you know, within the borders of that reservation, that they're being oppressed because these invisible bars that are around their community to keep them oppressed. But when I went out to New Brunswick, I noticed that the whole province has these invisible bars up around them, because it's an entire reserve, the whole place, because nobody's allowed to stand up for their rights, because the corporations and the government are working hand in hand. And if this is successfully happening in this province and it's not able to be squashed and not able to be dismantled the way it is, unfortunately, we're going to see our rights being violated just like they are there all across Canada, especially with Harper's greed and corruption and him being in bed with these companies. So I think it's important, you know, we call this a strategy session, to sit down and figure out ways, how far, and this is what I always tell people, how far are you willing to go for your cause? You have to first figure out what's your cause. And my cause is the water. You know, water's sacred, and I will die for my water. I will. And that's as far as I'm willing to go. So I will go as far as it takes to make sure that my water's protected. But not everybody is willing to go that distance, and it's understandable, because we all have our safe zones. So we have to figure out, are we going to, you know, write articles? Are we going to, you know, do research in order to help these people have their voices heard within the academic structures? Are we going to, you know, set up these strategy sessions? Are we going to go out and do, you know, action? Or are we going to go and have, you know, a weekend of, you know, where people come in and talk and we empower each other? Are we going to sit down, or are we going to discuss how we're going to move forward in this? So we all have to figure out exactly what our limits are and what our cause is. And once you figure that out, everything else, from what your cause is and to what your limit is, will fit together in order, you know, for it to be successful. So that's basically all I have to say right now. I don't want to take up too much time, because I know we're kind of limited on time restraints, but I'll hand it over to Cody.
How much time do you got?